Which BMI groups have representatives on this graph with BMRs greater than 1600 calories per day? So we find basal metabolic rate of 1600, and we want to know about the points that are above this line. So above this line, we have some points here between 25 and 30. And between 25 and 30, that is the overweight category. And then we have some also that are over 30, and that counts as the obese category. So those are the two categories that have representatives with basal metabolic rates above 1600 calories per day. The individual on this chart with the highest BMI has a BMR of approximately what? So BMI, body mass index, is the horizontal index. So the person who has the highest BMI is all the way to the right. It would be this point right here. And that person's basal metabolism rate appears to be approximately 1700. So we'd expect something very close to 1700. And indeed, answer choice D, 1702, is extremely close. So this is the answer, answer choice D. The trend line on the graph indicates for a given BMI what the expected BMR would be for that individual. In this group, how many individuals have a BMR higher than predicted by this trended line? So if we have a given body mass index, then being on this line would be exactly what would be expected to be the basal metabolic rate. And anyone who is above that would have a higher than expected basal metabolic rate. So really, what this question is just asking is, quite simply, how many dots are above the line? So this is just a matter of counting. We count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dots above the line. Now this one here might be puzzling to some people. Notice that one is pretty close to being on the line, and if anything it might be a little bit below the line. And so because it's not clearly above the line, we're not going to count that one. So we're just going to count the 7 that are circled. Those are the 7 that have a higher BMR than would be expected from the trend line.
You can pause the video and read through the problem, but let me give you the gist. The blue graph is for the revenue and the one in orange is for the cost of a certain company over the span 2007 to 2015. And we need to find the approximate percent increase in the revenue from 2010 to 2015. The percent increase of anything is the increase over the initial amount times 100. So the percent increase of the revenue is going to be the increase in the revenue in this period over the initial revenue, that's in 2010, times 100. And the increase is given as the revenue in 2015 minus the revenue in 2010 over the initial revenue, which is the revenue in 2010, times 100. And we are going to use the revenue graph, the one in blue. The cost graph has got nothing to do with this particular problem. So we are going to use this graph to find the revenue values in 2015 and 2010. Here's 2015, and the revenue looks to be slightly more than 450. Notice that the numbers on the y-axis go up in steps of 50, and therefore there's no way we could read this exact number. This number could be 458 or it could be 461, you never know. So all we are going to say is this number is almost equal to, this is a symbol for almost equal to, it's an approximation that we are supposed to use in this problem. So it's almost equal to $460 million. So I'll write an M for million. Similarly, the revenue in 2010, here's 2010. Now here's the number 250. This looks to be 250-ish, but you never know. it could be 251, it could be 254. So we are going to say this one is approximately equal to or almost equal to $250 million. And the denominator, of course, is the same as this one. So it's almost equal to $250 million. So the percent increase in the revenue is almost equal to 460 minus 250 is $210 million over $250 million times 100. We could cross the two m's out, meaning we are dividing the numerator and the denominator with 1 million. We could also cross out the zeros from the end, meaning we are dividing both these numbers with 10. Notice that 25 times 4 is 100, and therefore this comes out to be almost equal to 21 times 4, which is 84. Even though this is an approximation, the options are far and wide, therefore this has to be the answer.
From 2009 to 2010, the profit at QC Corporation increased by approximately what percent? So here we're looking at profit, and of course we're told in the text that profit equals revenue minus cost. So it's going to be the difference between the two lines on the graph. This is a good principle to know in general, that profit equals revenue minus cost. Notice that the answers are spread out and we get the word approximately, indicating that we can use a wild approximation for this. We don't necessarily need an exact calculation. Okay, let's look at the graph. And of course, each graph has a story. It looks like the story of this graph is we don't know what was going on before 2007, but from 2007 to 2009, profit was just above cost. And it looked like, for example, in 2009, this appears to be about a cost of 80, a revenue about 110, so a profit of about $30 million, not bad, but something happened between 2009 and 2010. Something happened, and suddenly their revenue went way up. Their cost stayed about on the same line, but revenue took this wild jump and then started increasing. And so suddenly the profits were much, much larger. And the big jump in profit was from 2009 to 2010. So here we have a profit of about 30. Here we have a profit. We're going from 90 up to 250. So that is a difference of 160. So we're going from 30 to 160. How much of a percent increase is that? That's the question. Starting value 30 million, ending value 160 million. What is the percent increase? Well, this is interesting. So this is about little more than 5 times $30 million, but that doesn't, if you go up to 5 times, that's not necessarily a 500% increase. We have to be very careful here. Let's think about this. If we increase by 100%, we'd be up to 60. If we increase by 200%, we'd be up to 90. If we increase by 300%, we added this 3 times, we'd be up to 120. If we increase by 400%, we'd be up to 150. Well, we're just over 400%. We're just over 150 at 160. So we have to be the number just before 400%. If we increase by 500%, that would put us up at 180. It's this very tricky thing that when you multiply by 5, you increase by 400% because you add 4 more parts to the original. If you multiply by 6, you increase by 500% because you've added 5 more parts to the original. Percentage increase is always about how much are you adding to the original. And so here we're adding a little more than 4 times 30. We're adding a little more than 120. And so that means that we're slightly more than 400, but not as big as 500. And the only possible answer is answer choice D. In 2013, the dollar amount of the profit at QN Corporation was approximately which of the following? So profit, the question was good enough to tell us in the text above the graph that profit equals revenue minus cost. That's really a principle you should know in general. That's a practical, real-world business principle, very fundamental, but they are good enough to tell us in the problem. So we look at the graph. We have a revenue graph and we have a cost graph. And so the profit is the difference between those two. So it's the difference between these 2 points. Well, this point is clearly at $350 million. This point probably about $160 million. And the difference between them, well, 350 minus 160 is about 190. So we'd expect the profit to be about $190 million. Answer choice C.